Moon Knight Episode 5 is now streaming on Disney Plus. After waiting for over a month for brand new Moon Knight content, I thought they couldn't surprise me or exceed themselves, and yet here we are. Let's talk about Episode 5. Mark and Steven work together, searching through their memories to find the truth about themselves or get left behind on their way to the underworld. But before I properly start with my review for Moon Knight Episode 5, Asylum, let me know your thoughts on this episode. Let me know your thoughts on the series. Every week we cover Moon Knight here, so if you haven't checked out previous reviews, go check them out right up here. Anything and everything down there. And if you love Moon Knight, if you love movies and TV, this is the place to be, so consider clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. And it's been a blast covering this show. The big difference right now was that I have no idea where this episode and next week's are going. Up until now, I've just been waiting to see all of you guys' reaction and discussing it with you in the comics, but this episode is a very profound, introspective journey that talks a lot about trauma, about coping, about growth. And that's very much what this episode of Moon Knight today is. It's about inner growth. It's about courage in confronting your trauma. Well, we get a ton of answers that the show has been spreading seeds for ever since the first episode, but we still get more questions left to be answered naturally, as this is not the last episode. That's what I love so much about this show, is it has this precise film pacing. Structurally, you can just recognize a story structure beautifully laid out in this episode, where by the end, we've come to the point of no return, the point where all is lost, where for the first time in any of these shows, I have no idea what's going to happen next, and that's very encouraging. And with only one episode left, which they could very much screw it up, I just am fully confident in Mohamed Diab, Jeremy Slater, and all the creators behind this. They've given us a very introspective, character-driven story about inner conflict, inner struggles that is very relatable. With Moon Knight, Marvel has conveyed their most authentic grit, where the show doesn't move, doesn't flow, it doesn't feel like anything else. This character doesn't feel like anyone else, and it has stayed very much in that path where it feels like every episode is exactly the kind of story that it should be, from what it came before and leading up to the next one. But let's now break down the episode for you. And we start the episode right where we left off, yelling at the appearance of Taweret, the goddess of women and children, according to what Steven says in this episode. And suddenly we cut back to Harrow's office, that this episode seems to treat like the return point, the checkpoint per se, as if this was a game where Steven or Mark return whenever they're trying to repress something, whenever they don't want to confront anything about their past, because this is a drive down memory lane where we use the doors into the rooms of the asylum to check out traumatic events, key events in the lives of these two personalities, and it's such an insightful, eye-opening episode in that regard that just breaks your heart throughout in regards to this character. And even though by the end it feels that Harrow is that point where people return to learn something so they can grow from it, it still feels somewhat like he's being manipulated into seeing himself as this broken person that needs help. Nevertheless, the episode makes it very clear that the asylum is how Mark sees the afterlife, because this realm called the Duat, where souls go to spend eternity, it's not something that humans can see. So this is how he's processing it, which proverbially I find very interesting, that this is how he sees himself. This is his weakness, that he sees himself as this person who needs help, who needs guidance throughout his life, because he's not whole, he's fragmented. He cannot, only by himself, put the pieces together, which is why when they go back to the office of Dr. Harrow is when we only see either Mark or Steven, and things take a very interesting turn whenever we see Steven there. But the episode does a great job at laying out what the goal and the mission per se here is, where to make it to paradise, Mark has to be whole. His heart has to be full to be accepted there. And so with Steven, he goes along this journey where it feels very much still like a strong horror vibe is inserted into this episode as they kind of confront each other throughout this episode as they're walking down the halls, eventually stepping into this room filled with dead people who are the people that Mark killed, and he remembers every single one of them. And there's this quick exchange that proves how Mark sees himself even as a bad man, but he has a conscience.
And you remember each person.
You try taking a life. See how quickly you forget.
This isn't just a guy who's happy killing. He doesn't take pleasure in it. He is carrying a lot of guilt, a lot of remorse, and he's afraid of facing his past mistakes, which is when we see the kid and immediately dive into Mark's past and learn the truth about Mark Spector. And as Steven protrudes himself into Mark's flashback, into his memory, we learn that he had a younger brother, and one day there was an accident and his younger brother died, which started this damaged relationship with his mother that explains so much. We get to see a little bit of his Jewish heritage, where they have the Shiva for his brother. And as Steven continues to, per se, invade Mark's memories deeper and deeper, we see the damage, the ramifications that the death of his brother caused between him and his mother, which explains why she never calls him back. And eventually we see that his mother passed away, where Steven himself doesn't know how to confront this. He doesn't accept it. He himself is repressing this memory of his mother's death. And that's, again, why she never calls him back. It's such a heartbreaking moment. And it's the one time and the first time we see Steven being sent back into Harrow's office, which is when he calls the mother and just has this breakdown that is sensational. And the mother, who has been a presence, off-screen presence, ever since the beginning, is the cause of what sent Mark and Steven's lives bleeding into each other. It was when he went to his mother's Shiva and didn't have the courage to go in there, to not give her that satisfaction, that Steven and Mark started protruding into each other's lives, taking control one and the other constantly. And because both Mark and Steven are trying to repress a trauma, they are trying to repress something not only from themselves but from one another, new cracks start opening up in their relationship, which leads to the ultimate truth when Mark finally accepts to tell Steven what happened, and we see the creation of Steven Grant by a young Mark Spector, where Steven was this new personality he gave himself to hide away from the abuse of his mother. And we learned that his mother never loved him again, really, and even beat him with a belt, gave him physical abuse. Steven became this proverbial cushion for Mark Spector to hide away from who his mother became to him even. It's a very, very powerful moment, very heartbreaking moment. Not only because we learn, finally we get the answers of who is the real guy and who is the made-up personality, who is the split personality that came somewhere, somehow in his life. And this breaks Steven's heart as he now sees himself as this made-up person and has to learn the truth and face the truth about his mother, because he only remembered the good stuff. Steven was created for the sole purpose of having a happy life, not having to endure the trauma that Mark did, which is, again, so heartbreaking. And Oscar Isaac playing this role, he has to do so much on camera. His performance is nothing short of stunning. It's mesmerizing to see him play tough and fragile and scared and angry, and he plays on all these different levels so organically, and he moves from one to another so naturally. Even at one point, there's 3 Oscar Isaacs on screen, and he just makes it all look easy, look natural, and that is absolutely praiseworthy. And speaking of 3 Oscar Isaacs at once on screen together, we see the night when Mark Spector became Moon Knight, where he had just killed a bunch of mercenaries, including Layla's father, who I still believe that was Jake Lockley. And we see a near-death Mark Spector ready to end his own life. And Khonshu is there, and he calls upon him. He sees his mind is fractured. He sees he's a weak man, both in body and in spirit. His spirit is completely broken, and even Steven sees this as Khonshu is just taking advantage of him. It's an amazing sequence, visually spectacular. Character-wise, it's very impactful. It absolutely changes the way we see Mark Spector, but it's doing something that the show has slowly but surely been building towards and teasing throughout, and that is the show is speaking a lot about man's relationship with God. And I'm coming at this, by the way, from someone who doesn't believe in God or anything, but it's a very powerful moment where it illustrates when someone is at their weakest is when they need something to believe in. And Mark has all this repression, all this trauma that he never was able to cope with, and this higher being, this deity, this God, is giving him a chance, an opportunity, a way to lash out, which he accepts. And I think it's very powerful how it mirrors real life, because it's usually when someone is at their weakest that they need something to believe, and in this case Khonshu gave Mark something to believe, and that was in himself and in the violence he can unleash upon the world. In the pain that he has repressing, he can finally get rid of that by lashing out against everyone else around him. And I just didn't know the show could do that, and could do that so effectively. But the way the show is handling on a more intimate way the fractured mind of Mark Spector, explaining his DID, explaining what he went through that caused him to become the man he is, and then what brought him to Khonshu, what brought him to be in cahoots with these gods and higher beings, and how much that has taken away from him. I'm just really surprised how this show is doing the things it is doing, and that it's doing them in the first place. It's absolutely stunning storytelling that I couldn't be happier that I'm witnessing. Which in itself not only continues to paint a compelling picture of Mark, it paints a compelling picture of what Harrow has been telling us throughout this show, that Khonshu was this evil god that takes advantage of weak people, which in itself is just how gods are, but yet it is something that Mark and Steven have to compromise with because they want to make it back to their body, but Khonshu and the healing powers of the Moon Knight, and I love it when Khonshu says, "Become my Moon Knight." Khonshu and the healing powers he brings are the only way Mark, Steven can survive once they return to their body. So that's what they gotta do, but they suddenly start being attacked by these undead people as the scales have not balanced. They basically put this sticking clock throughout the show as we see them trying to work together, beginning to trust each other throughout. And in this ending sequence, it's so great to see them working together with one another. It feels so rewarding after the previous 4 episodes, obviously, but after this episode, where they grow together, where growth is the literal way to win, is that they need to begin to trust each other, they need to cope, they need to face one another's trauma and learn from it. It's not the thing that makes them weak, but is what can make them stronger if only they just face it after so many years. And it's not easy. And the show makes it feel not easy. Which only makes it more heartbreaking when after a tough struggle where Steven steps up to try and fight alongside Mark, he gets taken away, he gets turned into sand, he dissipates, and now Mark is all alone, and finally the scales are balanced, which just suddenly leads him to paradise. The realm beyond, very similar to what we've seen in Black Panther, and I wonder if we're going to get some parallels on that in the finale next week. But it's so heartbreaking. Mark's security blanket that he created so he could hide away from the trauma that his mother caused on him, sacrifices himself for him. It kind of fulfills the mission for what he was created. And it's a beautiful moment to see Mark and Steven like calling onto one another, Steven asking for help. Again, this episode is very powerful, and this episode really surprised me. Not only that, it is shot beautifully. I think this is the best shot episode we've had so far on Moon Knight. Mohamed Diab did a great job at directing this, at giving us a character-driven episode that really just stays on the personal level. And we get glimpses at the bigger consequences, the repercussions of it all, what his trauma eventually unleashed upon him, upon the world, but it just looks gorgeous. We're allowed to feel the heartbreak from Mark's reveal that he was physically abused, Steven's realization that his mother passed away. And the visuals are stunning, beautiful, interesting, unique vistas that we've never seen. The realm of the reeds, journeying in this boat through the sea of sand, heading down into the underworld, where we see the soul starting to come down. Harrow supposedly is sending them down, and it's just very surprising. I didn't think this show could keep on doing it, like I said, and it keeps on doing it, which to me makes episode 5 of Moon Knight the best one yet. Because this is the episode that captures, with all its big reveals, with the answers it gives, what has distinguished the show from anything else in the MCU from the beginning. This is a tragedy. This is not a heroic story of someone who gained superpowers and became a hero, a better man. This is a person who was never able to cope with his trauma and repressed it so much that he was exploited. And the moment where he gains his power, it's a scary moment. It's not a victorious, rewarding win in Mark Spector's life. It's his descent into a bottomless pit of despair, which is what made them make this decision of, alright, I'll become Moon Knight because of my hurt and wanting to unleash that. That's what distinguishes the show. That's what distinguishes this character. And it has hit me so powerfully. It has everything I want in a story. It has trauma. It has relatable issue. It has broken characters trying to become something better, trying to win something. It has tragedy, and it's beautiful to watch. With fabulous character work and exquisite cinematography, it continues to allow the complex writing to shine through. Delivers this fantastical adventure with gods and superpowers, but at its heart, at its core, when you strip it all down, it is a dark, emotional, and compelling character drama about trauma and growth. But those are only my thoughts on Moon Knight episode 5. I'm stunned, really. So I hope you guys like it as much as I did. I hope you like it even more than I did. Thank you for joining me every week. If you do so, if this is your first time, make sure to click the subscribe button if you enjoy what you saw here and don't want to miss the last Moon Knight talk or any other video I put up. I've also been reviewing every single X-Men movie ahead of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and you can check that out right here. And of course, next week, I'll be back with Moon Knight, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and many videos coming very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my channel members for supporting this channel. And until the next one, love each other and love the movies.